present. And welcome to our special guest today, Baroness Bryony Worthington and Baroness Elena Heyman. And I see that Baroness Sheehan has also joined us, so all welcome. Who are the Worthington and Heyman are co-chairs of Peers for the Planet, and Miss Lynette Huntley. Lynette, where are you? There you are, okay. Who is the director of the Peers for the Planet. So it's so lovely to see all of you again. It's been such a long time, but time passes so quickly. As you know, Senator Coyle and I are the co-chairs of Centers for Climate Solutions, and we co-host these events with Mary actually taking most of the lead and I carrying her briefcase. But unfortunately, she's not feeling well, so she will be with us, but I will host the session. So I'm speaking to you from Ottawa, the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, where the Senate of Canada is located. I'm pleased to let you know that we have interpretation for today's session. Senators Dean, Saint-Germain, Cordy, Colin Deacon, Marty Deacon, Lafreda, Harder, Duncan, Gerba, Melville-Duchesne, Cotter, Ringuette, Pate, Coyle, and myself have contributed from our office budgets to provide this interpretation today and previously. And thanks so much, colleagues, for helping provide this essential service here. At the bottom right of your Zoom window, you can find the icon that indicates interpretation. Please click on that and choose your preferred language. In order to speak during the meeting, you will require a Senate-grade headset and have completed the sound check. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the presenters today from Peers for the Planet, the United Kingdom House of Lords Climate and Biodiversity Action Group. We were fortunate to have a meeting with them last year in June to learn about their model and their work. And that meeting sparked the creation of Senators for Climate Solutions, our group. Today, we'll hear from Baroness Worthington and Baroness Heyman, who, as I said, are co-chairs of the Peers for the Planet, on the challenges and successes that they have faced and the lessons that they have learned. They will be very, very helpful for us as we move ahead. Ms. Lynette Huntley, the director of the group, will also share updates on their recent projects. After their presentations, we will provide a brief overview of what our Senators for Climate Solutions group has done in the past year. We will then open the floor for questions and answers, and perhaps a discussion of ideas on how our groups can collaborate further. Peers for the Planet, we're thrilled to have you join our climate senators today, and we all look forward to hearing from you. So Baroness Worthington, I'll let you take it over from here, and the floor is over to the UK. Over to you all.
Thank you so much, Senator Kutcher, and it's a real delight to be here almost a year after our first meeting, and we're absolutely thrilled that you've formed your own group, and really very happy to be reconnecting and hoping to build strong connections going forward. I was just tasked with saying a few words about the international dimension of our work and the global context. Not to get too gloomy about things, but obviously on the climate perspective, things seem to be deteriorating relatively rapidly in terms of the impacts of the existing concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and extreme weather events and other impacts seem to be escalating. And we have still got a rising concentration of greenhouse gases despite more than 2 decades of climate talks. So we really have to step up and do more. Business as usual is not going to cut it. And for our work, we're constantly trying to balance between focusing on domestic issues where we as legislators can have a more direct role, but also in the context of knowing that really we can't solve this alone, and we must do this as United Nations, as a group, as countries together to solve the problem. And what we try to do is 2 things. One, advance legislation domestically that can act as hopefully a template or a test case that others can learn from, but also outreach to other senates so that we can create a network of legislators that we can have conversations at a global and international level. So we're thrilled to be in contact with you again. in Europe at the moment, obviously we're at war, and who would have predicted that when we last spoke? And it's having a big knock-on effect in terms of politics, but also global energy. We're now facing very high prices of fossil fuels across the planet, and that's having a big inflationary effect and pushing people into cost of living problems. So the political context has changed rather dramatically. But what I think is also emerging is that the solutions to instability and over-reliance on regimes such as Russia and climate change are often the same thing, which is reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and moving to more indigenous, more secure, cleaner forms of energy. So in some senses, in the short term, things have got a lot more difficult, but actually the long-term signal, if anything, is reinforced by recent events. We were the hosts of COP26 last November, and as a group, we were present in Glasgow, and my colleague Baroness Hayman was present at meetings there with other legislators in the conference, and we saw a successful outcome in that the rulebook of Paris was finalised, a range of very important sectoral announcements made, but we still saw far too little in the way of ambition from countries in terms of reducing emissions. So there's still a huge amount of work to be done. But my hope comes from the fact that at the moment, the number of solutions that we have available to us has really grown, and they've become cost effective. That no longer do we have to say we have to sacrifice the economy to make progress. We can actually meet those triple goals of secure energy systems, clean energy systems, and affordable energy systems. And so there's plenty for us to do. I won't say any more at each of those topics I've touched on. We could talk about at length, but I'm much more keen to get into the discussion. So I'll stop there and hand over to Baroness Hayman, who will say a bit more about our work domestically.
Thanks very much, Bryony. Yes, picking up from Bryony's reference to COP26 and our feeling last year that it was relatively easy to get verbal commitments from government on issues relating to climate. Everyone was anxious to lead and to be seen on the right side of the argument. What we were concerned about was delivery, how you turned those sorts of high aspirations into change on the ground, and whether the governance structures were there to ensure that it happened and that we actually fed through to the ultimate user, if you like, on all sorts of issues. I think there has been a big change. Some of that change comes from the factors that Bryony has talked about. The external factors have not only taken the focus away from environment and biodiversity issues, they've actually threatened their importance, because I think a false narrative has been set up between security and the environment and achieving net zero. A false dichotomy between the need to grow the economy and the need for that new economy to be green and sustainable, and to train people for jobs in it, to put the investment in it. And I think undoubtedly the legacy of some of the culture wars that have gone on is manifesting itself now in some of the arguments that we're having. And I mean, it's very domestic to us, but there is a hangover from the Brexit argument with many of the people who were so profoundly anti-European and anti-UK being part of the European Union, now also are turning that we must look after ourselves into, as I say, what I think is a completely false argument. We can't do anything on the issues that all of us in this virtual room are concerned about. And I think inevitably that change has led to government being more cautious, resiling, being less open to the sort of legislative change that we try and ensure happens. So that's the negative bit. The positive is that we've been trying to up our communications, to up our evidence base, to put the case that, you know, digging more oil out of the North Sea doesn't actually do anything either for the cost crisis or the supply crisis in the short or medium term, and that there are much better and cleaner ways of doing these things. And as Bryony said, there's also been lots of technical advances that make some of these things much easier to argue for without subsidy. And I think the other thing that makes me more optimistic is that to a large extent, business has got the message, industry have got the message. They're looking to these solutions and they're going ahead regardless of whether government says you should be doing this or you shouldn't. They can see the economic writing on the wall and they're pushing the agenda forward. So I think in that respect, last year in COP26 was really very useful because it did bring a lot of the big players to the table. So we continue to try and build support. We've had great external support, which means that we've managed to expand our team and we're better resourced. And I hope that Lynette and her colleagues will be slightly less overworked than they have been in the last 2 years. And we're still going on and doing the same things. Brian is involved in the procurement bill at the moment, trying to make sure that our procurement processes reflect our net zero and environmental aims. I'm doing the same thing on the terms of the new UK investment bank, which is being created. So we're still doing that work and focusing very much on always having a cross-party presence. So that's why people like, we're both crossbenchers, but why people like Shaz Sheehan, who's on the call, are really so important, because they come from a party background and can be hugely effective, and Shaz works on many of these amendments with us, and is a director of Peers for the Planet. So I think we're in a good place, but I wouldn't underestimate the difficulties that we're facing at the moment. And I'll be really interested to hear from you later in this conversation about your assessment of that sort of situation. But I think Lynette could let you know some of the specific projects that we're involved in at the moment.
Thanks, Elaine. We thought we'd share a couple of the things we've been up to. First of all, perhaps picking up on what Helene was saying about the challenges of delivery, because it's probably a challenge that many governments will face. Canada now has its climate law, and what we found, though, is despite having a very strong overarching framework, there is this problem of what one social scientist has termed the fog of enactment. And it certainly feels pretty foggy from where we're sitting at the moment in terms of the consistency and the coordination in how the UK government delivers on some of its promises. So one of the things that we have been thinking about, and an idea that has been gaining some political support and traction in the UK, is the idea of a net zero test for policymakers. We've found as Peers for the Planet that we get bill after bill that hasn't taken account of climate and nature considerations. And so the idea of such a test would be to make sure that there is a mechanism upstream in any policy process to ensure a better coherence and better consideration for our international and domestic commitments. You won't be surprised to know that, you know, many have had a sort of allergic reaction to the idea. There's a risk it could be tick boxy. There are many similar policy tests that at various times in history, I'm sure in Canada as well, the UK government has introduced to varying degrees of success. But we've therefore undertaken a research project along with a very prominent and respected think tank here in the UK called the Institute for Government, and a business group who work with non-exec directors on a range of business boards, just to think a little bit more deeply about the issues. And we've looked at the history in the UK, also taken learnings from other countries, and made a few recommendations on how such a test might be applied usefully and effectively. So it's very much work in progress, but I think our conclusion is that no test like this is ever perfect, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, and you shouldn't try it given the stakes that we have and how high those stakes are in terms of climate. So that's one area of work, and we're really happy to share that with you if in the course of your work it's of interest. And then the other thing I guess I wanted to mention is just a little bit more about our ongoing legislative work. It's a good proportion of what we do. As Bryony said, the intention is very much to see what blueprints can be created to share more widely, but also we find that when we have progress in legislation, it provides a further blueprint for ourselves and precedents that we can hold the government to and say, come on, you did it on this bill, why can't you do it on this next one? Helene mentioned we're currently working on procurement. Procurement is a huge lever over emissions as well as nature. And we're also working on a new investment bank, a green investment bank, and a bill that establishes that in the UK. But a few things that we have learned in the last few months on our legislative work that I think are really relevant to a group like this is, first of all, one of the blueprints that we have established, and we didn't get to this that fast, is that as well as thinking about net zero, we've developed a sort of triumvirate of objectives, which is that when we work on bills cross-party, we think about net zero, but we also think about climate adaptation and wider environmental goals. And we've now managed to secure wordings in 2 bills with that sort of triumvirate. And because we've got that precedent, we're now pushing it with government because it was their own words up under pressure from peers. And it's been a useful precedent for us going forward. It has a sort of a domino effect. I think the other thing we've learned is just a few very practical things about working across party. We've worked with peers outside the group, particularly where they have a subject specialism. So for example, on a skills bill, we worked with a former education secretary who wouldn't give her time to the group more generally, but was happy to help on something very specific in which she was an expert. We've done a similar thing on a recent health bill as well. So we're sort of feeling the leverage that the group can have a bit more widely. And we're also finding that we can be very effective on these non-environmental bills, the bills that you don't perhaps expect to be working on with a climate lens. And actually that many of the wider advocacy sector aren't really working on. Procurement is a really good example. We also recently worked on a new state aid bill, and that because they're sort of horizontal issues, it's much harder to get sort of wider coalitions and evidence bases in working on those sorts of things. So that's just a few things we've been doing. We're really happy going forward to share on our legislative work. We'd be really happy to talk to you or your staffers about, again, how we do it. Even if there are specific things you're looking at, And there may be other ways that we can share our policy briefings, especially those with more of an international bent to them. So I'll stop there.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Lynette and Baroness Worthington and Baroness Heyman. I really appreciate, and so it's terrific to learn about the incredible work that you're doing. And on a personal level, Lynette, I'd like to learn a lot more about your net zero policy test. So maybe we could chat a bit about that later. Again, you give us so many great things to think about and to challenge us. So those are two really good things to have. So what I'd like to do right now is just spend a couple of minutes to provide an update on what our group has been doing over the past year. And I have a few slides that will illustrate some of these initiatives. So I wonder if we could start with the first slide. That'd be great. Thank you. So Senator Coyle and I started the group with the purpose of bringing together, informing, and supporting Canadian senators who want to address the critical issue of climate change and solutions for climate change. And since the group's creation and in response to a survey from participant senators, we've been focused on educating ourselves on the issue of climate change and on the various and important solutions that we can look at to address climate change. And I want to note that we're solution neutral here. We're not jumping on one solution over another. We want to have a full a buffet of various solutions and their strengths and weaknesses. Currently, our group consists of 44 senators from 4 different Senate groups and a non-affiliated senator. And as you can see, we'll have been quite busy this year. So with COP26 being a critical global event on climate action, we made efforts to educate the members of our group on this conference with the context and outcomes and climate commitments. We organized 8 virtual speaker events where we invited experts and Canadian officials working on the climate file and climate issues to speak with our members. And our team also created 12 briefing notes on relevant events and reports with summaries for the senators. And I just want to acknowledge that we've had tremendous help from interns in our in Senator Coyle's office who have been just outstanding pulling this material together. We have an active Twitter account for the group to keep members and the public up to date on the climate issues and what we're doing in that area, and about our group activities. And we're working on a website, and which will be launched this fall as well. So brief overview of what we've done the past year. On the second slide here, we have the speaker events that we organized over the past year. The first, of course, was our meeting with you from Peers from the Planet. And as you see, we had a range of excellent speakers on various subjects, many of the speakers focusing on the Canadian context, but also speakers that were able to help us with the international context and the wider views as well. And we will be continuing this over the next year with other speakers on these various topics as well. The next slide, that's slide number 3. We also produced briefing notes on global climate conferences such as COP26 to inform the senators of the event and its significance and details about it. And most recently on Stockholm Plus 50. We've also provided summaries of various reports as well, such as the IPCC reports, audit reports on the government's climate action and climate initiatives in our federal budget. So our goal over the past year has been to bring this group together to inform, educate our members on Canada's climate action compared to global trends, and providing resources for our members to help ourselves educate, become more knowledgeable, and help us keep climate issues and solutions to the various climate issues on our radar personally, and then being able to use those in our work as legislators and advocates. So that's just a very brief overview of what we've done in our fledgling first year. And I can't believe, Mary, that the year has gone by so quickly. It just seems people won't know this, but it just seems like yesterday that I was walking along a cliff on Prince Edward Island and my phone rang, and it was Mary, and she says, I have this great idea. So here we are. And I'm so sorry you're not feeling your usual effervescent self, but I see you have your hand up, so I'll turn the floor over to you.
I just want to very briefly, if you can indulge me with this voice, thank you, Stan. And I just really want to thank our colleagues from Peers for the Planet, who really did inspire us to bring together our peers from all sides of our chamber to work together. And I think, as Stan said, this first year really was a forming year where we were able to come together. There were actually 3 other senators. Unfortunately, 1 died and 2 have retired since we formed. So it's quite a remarkable response. Out of 88 senators, we currently have half of our senators involved. And I want to really thank all of our members for their dedication. We're busy. We're all busy people. We're all doing this on top of everything else we are doing. And as Stan said, our staff, our GreenPAC intern, and right now it's Coco who's helping us, but also Stan's staff and my staff who are going above and beyond. Unlike the UK, we do not have the ability to set up a nonprofit and get external funding for what we're doing. So we're still, as you heard the little banter this morning about thanking everybody just to help with the interpretation. We can't even get interpretation covered. And of course, interpretation is essential in Canada. So we're trying to crack the nut on how we can better resource our activities so that we are able to be a more powerful force now that we're getting, better informed and coming together, coalescing as a group. So these are things that we will be taking into the new year. And I particularly respect and look forward to 2 things in our relationship with Peers for the Planet. One is continuing to share on these tools that you have, these approaches and tools and strategies for influencing policy and legislation. And secondly, how we can work together more collectively internationally, bringing our forces together with others. We've started to have a little connection with Mark Daly, the Speaker of the Senate or the equivalent of the Senate in Ireland, about youth engagement activities with his Senate on climate and what we might be able to collaborate on there. So I think there are a number of things that I'd love to pursue further, and just mention that this isn't the last time we're going to have a chance to talk, but a good time to reignite our conversation. Thank you, Stan, and thank you to all our colleagues from Peers.
And thank you, Mary. I see if people could either signal to me that you would like to now just join the conversation by putting something in the chat, that would be great. You can also put your hand up and I'll do my best to see the hands. So I see Senator McPhedran and then Senator Lankin.
And Stan, just before
Oh,
that,
sorry, go ahead.
can I just say that I see that Robin Teveson, Lord Teveson, another colleague of ours, has joined the call. Someone else who's been extremely active as a parliamentarian in these areas. So perhaps he'll be able to join the conversation, or as well as Shaz at some point.
That
Okay.
that would
Very
be
pleased to
wonderful.
join you. Thank you.
Well, welcome, Lord Teverson, and just pop your hand up if you want to join the conversation. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much. So, Senator McPhedran, the floor is yours. I don't hear Mary Lou. Well, we're waiting.
And that's,
there
how
you
is
are.
that?
Okay, now
That's-
I can hear you.
I just committed the COVID sin. I did not unmute. Let me thank you, Stan and Mary, for your co-leadership and also your teams. I'm speaking to you, I hope you can hear me okay. I'm in the basement of UN headquarters in Vienna. And this is day 2 of the first meeting of states parties to the UN Treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. And at the opening yesterday, UN Secretary General Guterres made the point that there are two existential threats to humankind and all beings, all creatures. And one, of course, is the climate crisis, and the other is the nuclear crisis. And my question is to whether your group, Peers for the Planet, have examined that as a question of a nexus between two very looming threats to civilization.
I put my hand up to answer that. Thank you, Senator McFadden. We remain very focused on the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. That's not to say we don't appreciate the complexities and how they all interrelate with other related issues. We remain technologically neutral on the solutions space deliberately so that we can maintain a cross-party consensus or group conversation, and we allow individual members to make their stances according to their own individual wishes and concerns when it comes to specific technologies or policies. And all I wanted to add was that the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has been phenomenal in calling out the detailed nature of the threat that the fossil fuel industry is presenting. And the thing that I've noticed, a conversation is starting about classifying fossil fuels as potential weapons of mass destruction. So that kind of echoing that, bringing together these two things, which are potentially very devastating to sustaining, life on an equitable planet. And there's going to be more and more, I think, conversation about quite how, I think Guterres used the phrase, the fossil industry has its foot on the neck of humanity, some other colourful language. It's a bit extreme, but it's also, I think, echoes the feeling that we have reached the point now where it has become very clear that we're not making enough progress, and we need to be much more specific about recognizing the nature and what's the cause of the problem. And maybe there are going to be treaties like the non-proliferation of nuclear weapon treaties. There may be treaties coming down the track which focus on the non-proliferation of fossil fuels, or the just exit and unwinding of fossil fuels according to an international agreement. Now, we're nowhere near that at the moment. COP26 is miles away from that kind of framework. But as the concerns grow and as the impacts grow, we may see more desire for some of these tougher types of treaties. But as Baroness Hayman mentioned, just at this point, we also have now a resurgence of interest in exploiting fossil fuels and exploring fossil fuels because of energy security concerns. So there's this horrible tension. I'll stop because but hopefully that helps some way answer your question.
Great, thank you very much for that. Anyone else want to weigh in on that interesting discussion? No. Okay, in that case, we'll go on to Senator Langton. Senator Langton.
Thank you very much, Stan and Mary, for all of your leadership in this, and many thanks to our guests for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. I was very interested in the net zero policy review that you're proposing to be part of a legislative process. I imagine you, as you said, there are many of these kinds of issue lens approaches that over the years we have attempted in terms of bringing those who are doing the legislative writing and drafting along to ensure these things are considered. One of the policies that we're very focused on in Canada is continuing to increase the capacity of a very solid gender-based plus analysis. What we have found is the government has taken an approach that forms part of the public services advice to cabinet, and therefore is covered by cabinet confidences. And that's another whole area that is being debated in Canada right now in terms of opening up and developing a public interest test to when cabinet documents are completely sealed or completely confident. that means that we know one's been done. They'll answer that question for us, but we never get to see it. We can use the Parliament Library, they can do their own, but we don't know what the government has seen. I'm just wondering, as you're developing this approach, do you have that issue with any of the other kinds of issue-lensed analysis that have been developed, that you're not able to see them as part of the briefings from government on the bill? And or how are you addressing that? Is it a concern with respect to how you develop your net zero lens analysis now? Thank you very much.
Shall I perhaps take that one? So actually, many of the historic tests that we've looked at are publicized. So there is a good basis for regulatory impact assessments as a sort of as perhaps providing a foundation for this kind of test, or other mechanisms that are in general put into the public domain. Having said that, I think our problem at the moment in the UK is very similar to the one you described, because there is a real lack of transparency about how decisions are made at the moment on policies that could either impact or impact on our climate targets, whether positively or negatively. And at the moment, what we have is we have 2 cabinet subcommittees established in order to have sort of decision making funneled through them, but nobody knows when they meet, or indeed if they meet, or what they talk about. And around that, there's no other government and no other mechanism. So I think our conclusion is a test needs to, in order to have credibility, for the public to be confident in it, for business to be confident in it, it needs to be clearly articulated, it needs to be published, and it needs to be possible to see the deliberation that has taken place through it. There's an interesting example from New Zealand where actually all decisions that go to the cabinet that relate to emissions do have an emissions test, which is published. So, it's a different context, but I think what we would probably want to work towards is a methodology that is not necessarily very heavy, but at least in the first instance, has a clear set of principles that civil servants have asked themselves about, that ministers have asked themselves about, and that can be clear to everybody, all the stakeholders who might be affected.